The first guard changed posts 3 minutes before the opening bell. Elara Voss noticed because no one else did. She was carrying a tray of crystal wine cups across the royal banquet hall when the guard beside the eastern arch abandoned his assigned position and traded places with a man near the musicians' gallery. There was no signal. No officer gave an order. The exchange looked casual enough to disappear beneath laughter, silverware, and the scrape of chairs. Elara kept walking. The second guard moved before she reached the service doors. Her fingers tightened beneath the tray. Greywatch had used sequences like this when normal signals could not be trusted. One sentry shifted, then another. Each movement changed what the next man could see without making the perimeter appear weaker. Except Greywatch had designed those patterns to detect infiltration. Someone here was using one backward. Elara entered the service corridor, set down the empty tray, and checked the nearest door latch as if she were preparing for another course. Still secure. She glanced toward the narrow passage leading to the western kitchens. 2 servants passed through. A guard watched them. For now, the second banquet bell was due soon. Beyond the high windows, the moon was climbing toward the towers. She returned to the hall. A young nobleman reached for a fresh glass from her tray, then paused. "What is that?" Elara knew before he pointed. The edge of black ink showed where her collar had shifted beneath her hood. "A tattoo," he said loudly. "On a palace waitress?" His companion leaned closer. "Looks like she tried to copy a warrior mark." A few people laughed. Elara adjusted the fabric and moved to continue serving. The noble caught another glimpse. "Maybe she thinks the hood makes it mysterious." More laughter followed. Elara ignored them because explaining the tattoo would be worse than enduring the joke. She had spent years making certain no one connected a quiet Omega waitress with Greywatch. Tonight was not the night to undo that. Then she saw the third guard change position. Her pulse stumbled. Eastern Arch Musicians Gallery. North entrance. The sequence was forming exactly as she remembered. She stopped beside a pillar and studied the room without turning her head. The Alpha King sat beyond the central tables speaking with members of his council. Commander Garrick Thorne stood near the royal platform, calm and watchful. No alarm. No visible concern. Perhaps she was wrong. Then a fourth guard left his post. Elara felt the old pattern lock into place in her memory. The guards were not protecting the banquet anymore. They were creating a corridor through it. She looked toward the moonlit windows, then toward the nearest bell tower. There was still time before the final ceremonial bell, but not much. And if the sequence continued, whoever had begun the breach was already inside the palace. Elara did not go to the king. Not yet. Crossing the banquet hall to accuse royal guards without proof would end with her removed before she could learn what the sequence was building toward. Instead, she carried her tray through the west service entrance and found a junior security officer checking servant passes near the corridor. 3 guards have changed posts without orders, she said quietly. A 4th just completed the sequence. Check the west corridor before the next bell. The officer stared at her. "You're reporting guard rotations?" "I'm telling you the rotations are creating an unobserved route." His expression hardened. "Wait here." He did not check the corridor. He summoned Commander Thorne. Thorne arrived moments later, broad-shouldered in royal black, his irritation controlled enough to be more dangerous than anger. "You've been watching my guards?" Elara kept her voice level. "Someone should." The officer stiffened. Thorne led her back into the banquet hall, where nearby conversations faded as people noticed the confrontation. The same nobleman who had mocked her earlier smiled when he recognized her. "Our mysterious warrior again." Thorne ignored him. "Explain why a palace waitress is studying restricted security movements." "I already explained what matters. Check the west service corridor when the next bell sounds." A noblewoman laughed. Perhaps her tattoo told her. More laughter spread. Elara turned away, but someone passing behind her caught the edge of her hood. The fabric pulled free before she could stop it. Cool air touched her neck. Silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then they saw the tattoo. The unfinished black wolf curved beneath her collar, its broken field lines extending toward her shoulder. "That," the young nobleman said. "That's the great secret. It isn't even finished." A waitress wearing a soldier's mark. The laughter returned. Across the hall, a chair moved. Alpha King Ronan Vale had risen. He was looking directly at Elara. Not at her uniform. Not at Thorne. At the tattoo. His face had gone still. Enough. The single word silenced the room. Ronan crossed the floor until only a few steps separated them. His gaze remained on the unfinished pattern. Where did you get that mark? Elara looked past him toward Thorn. The commander was watching her now with an attention he had not shown before. I won't answer that here. Thorn scoffed. Convenient. Ronan's eyes narrowed, but Elara spoke before he could order her to explain. You don't have to believe me yet. Test what I know. She pointed toward the western side of the hall. When the next bell rings, the west service corridor will lose its guard coverage. Not permanently, just long enough to move someone through unseen. Thorn stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is absurd. The rotation is controlled. Then nothing will happen, Elara said. The bell rang. Every head seemed to turn toward the west arch. One guard moved toward the banquet entrance. Another crossed to replace him. For several seconds, no one replaced the man watching the service corridor. The passage stood open, unguarded. Ronan's expression changed. Thorn began. That could be. Close the doors, Ronan ordered. The royal guards hesitated. All of them. Heavy doors shut around the banquet hall. A murmur of fear replaced the laughter. Ronan looked at Elara once more, then at his commander. No one leaves this palace until I know who changed those rotations. Elara pulled her hood back over her head, but it was too late to become invisible again. The king had recognized Greywatch's mark, and someone inside his palace was using Greywatch's methods. The banquet doors had barely finished closing when Ronan ordered the remaining guards to hold every entrance. The laughter was gone now. Elara could feel the weight of dozens of eyes through the folds of her hood. Thorn stepped closer. You made a prediction, he said. That does not make you trustworthy. No, Elara replied. But the empty corridor should make you concerned. It makes me concerned about how you knew. Ronan raised one hand. Enough. Bring her somewhere private. Elara followed him into a smaller chamber beside the banquet hall, but Thorn came with them. The door shut behind the three of them. Ronan faced her. Your name? Elara Voss. Position? Waitress. His expression tightened. That was not what I meant. It is the position I have. Thorn gave a short, humorless laugh. She has been watching security routes, wearing a military tattoo, and predicting guard movements. Your Majesty, we should detain her until we understand who she is. Elara looked at him. If I were controlling the breach, why would I point you toward the corridor? To make yourself useful. Then why did the corridor actually empty? Thorn's jaw tightened. Ronan studied her instead. You recognize the sequence. Yes. How? Elara hesitated. She could tell him everything. The moment she did, the name Greywatch would become a weapon against her. I learned patterns, she said. From whom? People who are no longer here. Thorn stepped forward. Greywatch. The word landed harder than Elara expected. Ronan's eyes sharpened. Thorn continued. That mark belongs to Greywatch. Their insignia was restricted after the unit was condemned. Elara said nothing. Which means, Thorn said, you have just given us another reason to question you. Ronan did not immediately answer. Elara could see the calculation in his face. He had recognized the tattoo, but recognition was not trust. He was still the Alpha King, and she was still a waitress who knew military patterns she should not know. Then a shout came from the corridor. A guard entered and bowed quickly. Your Majesty, we found someone trying the western service door. Thorn looked at Elara. She felt the accusation before he spoke. You see, Ronan dismissed the guard and turned back to her. Did you know someone would be there? I knew the route would become vulnerable. That is not the same answer. No, Ronan's gaze stayed on her. Then tell me what happens next. Elara closed her eyes for a moment and rebuilt the sequence in her head. Eastern Arch Musicians Gallery. North entrance. Western corridor. The pattern should have continued toward the kitchens. But something felt wrong. Someone is changing it, she said. Who? I don't know. She opened her eyes. The original sequence was designed to expose movement. Whoever is doing this knows enough to imitate it, but not enough to understand why each position mattered. Ronan looked toward Thorn. For the first time, the commander's certainty faltered. Elara continued. The kitchens are the next likely vulnerability. Ronan gave a short order to 2 guards. Check them. Minutes later, they returned with a shaken servant and news of an unauthorized access attempt near the kitchen passage. Thorn immediately seized on it. She knew. Elara stared at the floor. She had been right about the vulnerability, but something about the timing bothered her. She followed the guards back toward the service area and noticed a small metal seal lying beside a ledger. She picked it up. The royal service insignia looked perfect. Almost. The wolf's left ear was slightly too narrow. Elara's stomach tightened. That seal is duplicated. Ronan looked at it. Thorn's voice came quietly from behind them. And who has easier access to service records than a palace waitress? Elara slowly turned. The evidence had just stopped proving she was useful. Now it could be used to make her look guilty. Elara looked at the duplicated seal in Ronan's hand and understood that silence was no longer protecting her. It was only giving Thorn room to define the story first. I was at Grey Watch, she said. The chamber went still. Ronan did not move. You served there? Not as a soldier. Thorn's expression sharpened. Then what were you? A signal runner. The answer seemed too small for the reaction it caused. Elara pulled her hood forward. Again, though the tattoo was already known. I carried messages when the normal routes were compromised. I memorized paths, bell sequences, terrain markers, emergency signals. That was my job. You were a child, Ronan said quietly. Almost. His eyes dropped to the unfinished black wolf on her skin. Elara Voss, he said slowly. The mark was issued to Grey Watch personnel. I know. Then why is yours unfinished? She touched the edge of the tattoo through her collar. Because the work was never completed. She did not explain further. Thorn folded his arms. Grey Watch abandoned its post. Everyone knows that. Elara looked directly at him. That is what the record says. You disagree? I was there. Her voice remained calm, but her fingers had tightened against the fabric. The night Grey Watch fell, I carried a warning to the Eastern Relay. I was told to keep running even if nobody answered. Ronan's face changed. A memory had surfaced behind his eyes. A warning, he repeated. Elara nodded. Years ago, during a border attack, someone reached one of our evacuation relays, Ronan said. The message warned us that the enemy had already crossed the outer line. Thorn glanced toward him. Ronan ignored him. That warning saved my unit. Elara said nothing. You carried it? Yes. The room seemed smaller. Ronan stared at the tattoo again, then at her face. I never saw the runner. I know. You were wearing a hood. Yes. His breathing slowed. So it was you. Elara looked away. She had expected recognition to feel like justice. Instead, it felt like another door opening onto a place she had spent years trying to leave behind. Ronan stepped closer. Why did Grey Watch get blamed? Elara finally met his eyes. Because the warning was delivered, and the record still said we abandoned the post. Thorn interrupted. Your Majesty, this is an old accusation from someone whose own connection to Grey Watch is now confirmed. Elara turned toward him. I am not asking you to believe me. Then what are you asking? She pointed to the guard positions still visible through the open doorway. Look at what happened tonight. Ronan followed her gaze. The people using the palace routes aren't copying Grey Watch's defense system, Elara said. They're copying the sequence that defeated it. Thorn's face remained controlled, but Elara saw the smallest pause. Ronan saw it too. The realization settled between them. The question was no longer why a waitress knew the security pattern. It was who had known enough about Grey Watch to recreate the failure that destroyed it. Elara looked toward the palace clock. The final bell was getting closer. Someone inside this palace learned from the same mistake, she said. And tonight, they're using it again. Ronan closed his hand around the duplicated seal. Then we find out who. Elara shook her head. Not yet. His eyes narrowed. We find out what they want first. And for the first time that night, Ronan was no longer looking at her as a suspicious waitress. He was looking at the last person who had carried Grey Watch's warning out alive. Elara followed Ronan into the records chamber while two guards remained outside the door. The final bell was drawing closer, and every minute made the palace corridors more dangerous. She spread the guard schedule across the table. Start here, she said, pointing to the first exchange. Then this one. Then the western corridor. Ronan leaned over the parchment. They create gaps. Visible gaps, Elara corrected. The gaps are supposed to make us look in the wrong places. She traced the sequence with one finger. Someone needs control over the service routes and the bell schedule. Ronan looked toward the shelves of palace records. Then we find the bell records. They searched the ledgers together. Elara recognized the old notation system, but the newest pages had been rewritten in a cleaner hand. One timing entry was different by less than a minute. She frowned. This is wrong. Ronan looked closer. Why? The bell sequence should be fixed. Could someone have made an error? Not this one. Before she could explain, the door opened. Commander Thorne entered with 4 guards. His gaze went immediately to the table, then to Elara. We found something. He placed a small bundle beside the duplicated service seal. Elara stared at it. A palace service ledger, a key, another seal impression, all connected to the service area where she worked. Thorne spoke calmly. The duplicate was made using materials stored in the servants' records room. Ronan's expression hardened. And Elara Voss has access. Elara felt the trap close. Thorne continued. She knows the routes. She knows the guard patterns. She possesses a Grey Watch insignia. Now we find evidence connecting her to the duplicated seal. Ronan looked at Elara. She could have denied everything. Instead, she asked, when was the seal made? Thorne answered immediately. Tonight. Elara looked at the impression again. That was the problem. The metal was too clean. She knew enough about service seals to recognize fresh handling, but the mark itself did not prove who had made it. You planted it, she said. A guard stepped forward. Thorne's voice remained cold. Careful. Elara looked at Ronan. If you defend me because you remember Grey Watch, they will say I manipulated you. Ronan said nothing. She understood his silence. He was caught between evidence and recognition. The court had already seen him react to her tattoo. If he protected her now, without proof, Thorne could turn the entire investigation into a story about an Alpha King compromised by an old debt. Elara looked again at the bell ledger. One entry was wrong. The discrepancy was small enough that no one else had noticed it, but it was there. She understood what it meant. The obvious breach was not the real target, and if she stayed free, Thorne could claim she was manipulating the investigation. If you want to detain me, she said, do it. Ronan's eyes narrowed. Elara, keep every piece of evidence exactly where it was found. Log it publicly. No one changes the records. Thorne smiled faintly. You're surrendering? I'm protecting the evidence. Ronan stepped toward her. You know what happens if this turns against you. Yes. You could be charged with treason. I know. She extended her hands. For one long moment, Ronan did not move. Then he gave the order. Temporary custody. Nothing removed from the evidence room. The guards took Elara by the arms. As she was led toward the door, she looked back at the bell ledger one final time. The altered entry was not simply wrong. It was the key. Someone had changed the timing to make the palace defend the wrong place. And the final bell was getting closer. The guards took Elara to a narrow holding room beneath the records chamber, leaving the door unlocked only long enough to place her inside. She sat on the wooden bench and closed her eyes. The bell ledger remained in her mind. Not the altered time itself. The distance between it and the guard movements. She had been wrong in the kitchen. She had assumed the old Grey Watch sequence was being repeated in the same order. It wasn't. The sequence had never been about where the guards moved. It was about when they moved. Each visible gap pulled attention toward a false vulnerability. The real passage appeared safe only because everyone had already been redirected. Elara opened her eyes. The bell was the clock. The guards were the hands. And someone knew exactly how to make both lie. Outside, footsteps approached. Ronan entered alone. He stopped several feet from her. You were right about the ledger, he said. Elara stood. What did you find? The seal was created before tonight. She stared at him. How long before? Long enough that it could not have been made by you tonight. A breath left her. But that doesn't prove who made it. No. Ronan looked toward the door. I checked the service records myself. The materials connected to the seal were already accounted for before your shift began. Elara nodded slowly. So the evidence against me was prepared. Yes. She studied his face. You still haven't told me why you're here. I wanted to hear the sequence again. She pointed toward the corridor. Then don't follow the gaps. Follow the timing. Ronan waited. Elara explained the pattern without giving him more history than necessary. The first guard movement created a visible weakness. The second pulled attention toward another route. The third made the first seem harmless. The false bell timing would force the remaining defenders toward the wrong entrance. And the final bell? Ronan asked. That's when the real passage opens. Where? I don't know yet. Ronan's expression tightened. Then what do you need? The original bell schedule. The one from before the alteration. I'll get it. He turned toward the door. Ronan. He stopped. If the records are being controlled from inside the security structure, don't announce what you found. His eyes met hers. You think someone close to me is involved? I think someone close to the system has enough access to change it. That is not the same thing. No, Elara lowered her gaze. I made the wrong assumption earlier. I thought the person copying Greywatch would repeat the old route. They aren't. They're using the old failure to make us expect the wrong route. Ronan was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You could have told me that before I ordered you detained. You needed to see the evidence without me standing beside it." Something shifted in his expression. Not forgiveness. Not affection. Something quieter. Respect. He left. Less than a minute later, voices rose outside. Elara heard Thorn demanding access to the security chamber. Then Ronan's voice cut through the corridor. No, a pause. "Your Majesty, I am responsible for palace security." "You were." The words were followed by heavy footsteps. The door opened again. Ronan stood there with 2 guards behind him. "Commander Thorn is suspended from operational command until this is resolved." Elara stared at him. "That will leave you without your security commander." "I know. You're taking a political risk." "I know that too." He stepped aside. "You said the final breach would come through a passage everyone thinks is protected. Show me where to look." Elara walked past him. For the first time that night, she was not being escorted as a suspect. She was being trusted with a decision that could fail in front of the entire palace. And she knew exactly what it would cost if she was wrong. Elara led Ronan through the service corridor while the remaining guards followed at a distance. She stopped beside the bell access chamber and pointed toward the schedule posted beside the door. This is where the timing changes. Ronan studied the entries, the altered bell record, and the guard movements. Match it. She placed the 3 pieces of evidence together: the original guard sequence, the duplicated service seal, and the altered bell timing. Individually, they look harmless. Together, they describe the same movement. Ronan followed her finger across the pages. The guards are being pulled away from one passage. Yes. And the seal gives someone access through the service routes. Yes. And the bell tells them when the defenders will move. Elara nodded. The breach isn't coming from the direction we've been watching. A sharp sound came from farther down the corridor. Both turned. A guard shouted. Someone was running toward the bell chamber. Ronan moved first, but Elara caught his arm. "Don't chase him." He stopped. "He wants us to." They heard another door slam. Elara looked at the schedule again. That's part of the pattern. Ronan understood. He's trying to trigger another movement. Yes. They moved toward the bell chamber instead. The suspended commander appeared at the far end of the passage, 2 guards behind him. His expression was no longer controlled. "Your Majesty, step away from her." Ronan's voice hardened. "You no longer give orders here." Thorn looked at Elara. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." Elara stared at him. "Greywatch." For the first time, his composure cracked. Ronan saw it. "So you know the name." Thorn's silence answered before he did. Elara stepped closer. The original failure wasn't a failure of defense. Thorn backed toward the bell mechanism. "You were there," she said. "I wasn't the only one." Ronan's gaze sharpened. Elara looked at the altered ledger. The warning reached the relay. Thorn's face tightened. But the reinforcements never came. He said nothing. Because someone changed the signal. Still nothing. Elara's voice dropped. And the person who changed it knew exactly how Greywatch would respond. Ronan looked from her to Thorn. "You helped destroy them." Thorn finally moved. He reached for the bell mechanism. Ronan ordered the guards forward. Thorn tried to pull the release, but Elara shouted, "Don't let him ring it." One guard seized his arm. The bell remained silent. Thorn struggled once, then stopped. Elara looked at the 3 pieces of evidence again. The altered guard sequence. The duplicated service seal. The false bell timing. Everything had been designed to recreate the same failure that had destroyed Greywatch years ago. Thorn had not merely known the old system. He had helped create the lie that followed it. And tonight, he had expected everyone who understood it to be dead. Elara looked at Ronan. They thought no one survived who could read the pattern. Ronan's eyes settled on her tattoo. "You did." A distant bell began to move inside the tower. Not the final bell. The one before it. Elara's expression changed. "We have minutes." Ronan turned to the guards. "Secure Commander Thorn." Then he faced Elara. "Tell me where to send them." Elara looked toward the palace entrance. "Everywhere except where they expect you to." Ronan did not question her. He gave the order. And for the first time, the palace was moving according to the warning Greywatch had once been punished for delivering. The penultimate bell had barely faded when Elara saw the first guard move toward the royal entrance. Exactly as expected. "Hold," she said. Ronan raised his hand. The guard stopped. Across the palace, another sentry abandoned the northern passage. Then another moved toward the banquet hall. Elara watched the pattern unfold. "They're pulling everyone toward the throne corridor." Ronan looked at her. "And the real passage?" "The service route beneath the western gallery." A guard hurried toward them. "Your Majesty, we heard movement near the royal entrance." "Leave it." The guard hesitated. Ronan repeated, "Leave it." Elara could feel the weight of the decision. Every instinct of the palace guard would tell them to defend the throne first. That was precisely why the pattern worked. She pointed to the bell schedule. The first movement created the opening. The second made everyone watch the wrong corridor. The third forced the remaining guards into position. The seal gave the infiltrators access. Ronan followed her hand. "And the bell? It makes the final displacement look official." He understood. "Then when the final bell rings, they expect the western route to be empty." "Yes." A muffled impact sounded behind the service wall. Elara froze. "They're already there." Ronan turned toward the hidden passage. "Can we stop them now?" "Not without changing the pattern." His eyes met hers. "If we move too soon, they'll know we understood." Elara's voice remained steady, though her pulse hammered. "They have to believe the palace is still reacting exactly as planned." Ronan nodded. He ordered the guards to remain concealed along the secondary corridors. No one moved toward the obvious entrance. The palace seemed unnaturally quiet. Then the final bell began. One deep note rolled through the stone halls. The guards at the royal entrance shifted. The service passage opened. 3 figures slipped through the darkness. Elara raised one hand. "Now." Ronan gave the order. The hidden guards moved from both sides. The first intruder tried to retreat. Another reached for the service seal, but the guard seized his wrist before he could use it. The third ran toward the bell mechanism. Elara recognized the movement. "He's the decoy." Ronan turned. "After him." "No. The real breach is behind the second door." They moved together. Elara reached the door first and stopped. The lock bore the same altered service seal. She looked at Ronan. "This is it." He opened the door. Inside, 2 more infiltrators were waiting with weapons drawn. The guards surrounded them before they could advance. For several seconds, the corridor was filled with shouting, boots, and the scrape of steel against stone. Then silence returned. No one had reached the royal hall. No one had been able to claim the palace was caught unprepared, because Elara had not simply warned them. She had shown them where the warning became proof. Ronan looked toward the captured men, then at the evidence still held by the guards. "The seal." Elara nodded. "The timing." Another nod. "And the guard movements." All 3 point to the same operation. A guard approached with Thorne's recovered records. The altered bell schedule matched the access route. The duplicated seal matched the passage. The guard movements matched the displacement. The evidence no longer depended on Elara's word. It had become visible to everyone standing there. Ronan turned toward the guards and ordered Commander Thorne brought forward. When Thorne was forced into the corridor, his face had lost its earlier confidence. Ronan looked at him. "You used the same failure that destroyed Greywatch." Thorne said nothing. "You changed the signals," Ronan continued. "You altered the record. And tonight you tried to repeat it." Still silence. Elara stepped beside Ronan. For years, Greywatch had carried a name it did not deserve. Tonight, that lie had finally broken. Ronan faced the witnesses gathered around the passage. "This record will be reopened." Then his gaze settled on Elara's tattoo. "Not because she was once the person who saved me." He paused. "Because tonight, she proved the truth when no one else could see it." The waitress they had mocked stood beneath the palace lights with her hood still back. And no one laughed. By the time the palace gates were secured, the laughter from the banquet felt like it belonged to another night. Commander Thorne was taken into custody, and the records connected to the altered guard sequence, duplicated service seal, and false bell timing were placed under witness control. For the first time, Greywatch had evidence that could not be dismissed as the word of a disgraced unit. Ronan ordered the old record reopened, and the official accusation of abandonment was suspended pending the full examination of the surviving evidence. Elara stood quietly while the names of the dead were read back into the record. She had spent years believing that survival meant staying invisible. Tonight, Remaining silent would have left the dead carrying a lie she knew was false. Ronan approached after the council had withdrawn. The Border Warning Network needs someone who understands what happened, he said. I want you to help rebuild it. Elara looked at him carefully. As what? Not a symbol. Not a court ornament. The person who knows what the system needs. She considered the offer. Then I choose the terms. Ronan nodded. Tell me. I work where the Warning Network needs me. I keep my own authority. And nobody decides who I am. Because of that, Mark. His expression softened. Agreed. He did not offer her a crown. He did not call her Luna. He did not ask her to become something she had never wanted to be. He simply accepted the terms she had chosen. Later, away from the council chamber, Elara stood beneath an open window overlooking the dark palace grounds. Her hood rested against her shoulders. The black tattoo remained uncovered. Ronan stopped several steps away. I recognize the mark tonight, he said. But that isn't why I trust you. Elara waited. The mark told me who you had been. What you did tonight showed me who you are. She looked down at the unfinished wolf. You once thought recognizing me was enough. I did. He took another step, then stopped before reaching her. I don't want recognition to decide anything for you now. Elara studied him in the quiet. Then don't. He waited. Ask. Ronan did. Not as king. Not as alpha. Just as the man standing before her. May I stay? A small smile touched her face. Slowly. His answer was immediate. Slowly. Years ago, her hood had been pulled away so others could laugh at the tattoo they called a joke. Tonight, Elara reached for the fabric herself. She could have covered the mark again. Instead, she left the hood where it was and stepped beside him. The tattoo remained visible beneath the palace light. No longer a disguise, no longer an accusation, and no longer something she needed to hide.